Yeah. This will cost this letter was $1. Blissfield,
north of Blissfield, yeah.
grocery store. So this has different concepts in there. And then this is a
Well, I remember this thing.
for a meal hour,
I
the son of August and his wife Camille. Right. Emily. Kind of fun. Then for making
Yeah. You guys said
grandmother passed away. And while we were going to her house, this is the first place prize cup for the best goatee during the bicentennial, no, sesquicentennial, sorry. So 1974, her grandpa.
It's been a long time. I've been part of it myself.
Sure of it?
In 8 years.
And then, I don't remember him, and then the other one was Oliver Bodie Jr. Oh, no, wait, oh no, that was the beard, ugliest. They had the 6 classes. Had this beard, full beard, ugliest, mustache, and sideburns, and issue they're thinking about goatee. So I'll lay these out if you guys want to look. We won't pass them only because, you know, if you want to come and look at them, that's fine. It was best goatee, Jacob Benema and Earl Osborne Jr. on the other side, Ken Brown in the middle, and then schools because the prize. And then factory from Michigan for a year now.
No, that's bad. It's a hot
rod. So it's Leonard's factory from Myra. Does anybody remember the Leonard's factory?
You know, I said there was a buzz Leonard that lived on the end of Pixley, but between here or
there's a lot of Leonards too, like
Leonard, yeah.
Well, no. Yeah,
Oh, we want you to send in somebody's got to pay for it.
Shannon, I'm a Leonard was Leonard, so I don't know.
I'm getting static from other people's computers. I wonder if they could mute their computer so I can hear.
And then here's a little library card. Lenawee County Library found in the current location of Royal Yoga's basement. So that was donated. Those are all. So those are new items and then business. I'll try and do it quickly. Sorry about that. We have, if anybody wants to learn how to catalog items, there's a
generations of people. Then they move from those and they are affected by those events for a long period of time, far into adulthood. 9/11 happened to a whole generation of folks.
If you want to get on the World Research Program, I shouldn't make popcorn, shouldn't I? I'm sorry. So Lily's going to be there all day, the 13th. It's a Saturday. And if you wanted to train for Past Perfect Done, and that's the program that we're using to catalog items. And Annalise been working, she made a, I don't know if anybody wants to look at what are you calling that?
A guide?
A guide, yes, ma'am. And it just tells you how we're putting it into Past Perfect. And we got all of the wood carvings done. She got the postcards done that Dorothy Delker donated. And slow but sure, we're going to get better at this. Kathy came and trained today. And I'm reading the CDs, but every time I start watching them, I fall asleep. I don't know what's up with that. And so maybe I'll just read her guide, I don't know, you know. And so I'll pass it around if anybody ever wants to train on that. And then also, okay, so I'll just pass that around. Oh, we need a host for the 27th, 2 hosts for the 27th. So, and I did call Heather, there are no extracurriculars in March that we need to make sure we have somebody here at the depot. And then, okay, so that's it. She's gonna be here on 3:15 and on 3:27, we need helpers. And then we're gonna go through the papers. And I didn't set up a time, I apologize. I would like to look at the calendar and set up 2 days to do that this month. So, and the people that were interested in helping were Shelby, Phyllis, Kathy, Dina, Connie, and then we said not Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. So I don't remember what our notes said exactly. Do you remember?
Looking week, they might be me, just because I work.
Monday, Tuesday, yeah. And I know Thursday Kathy works. So let's just set some days up and do it. And you want to or not? I have to, but I think I might have another one in first thing on. So let's come up with some days. No. So, shall we do Wednesdays then, right? And it looks like I'm babysitting. What time of day? No, because, well, I'm babysitting grandkids the week of the 14th. But they're in school all day, so I could come in, you know, later morning, afternoon. I could come anytime after 10 or 9 even. And then I can let the other ladies know. You want to do 2 Wednesdays, just plan on it? Okay, so how about, well, 10 o'clock? Sure. 10 to 12. Let's do it on the 24th and 31st. Okay, is that all right? 10 to 12. And that's to go through. Dorothy Delper donated all these boxes of newspapers, and we have to decide. We won't probably keep them because they are all on file at the library, right? What does he call it? It's not the film, it's whatever. At the library, the newspapers.
Okay.
Yeah, so go through and see if there's any important articles that we might want to, so it's just going to take a while, and we probably won't keep all of them here because it's a lot. So
17th and 24th and 10 to 12, right?
24th and the 31st. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Only because I'm babysitting grandkids in a week of, and I don't know exactly how much. Okay, so that is 324 and 331. Okay. We have a new Blissfield Area Historical Society Facebook page that is public. So go look at it. You know, sign yourself on.
Please like it. Yeah.
Please like it, or tell us why you don't like it. I'll put it up.
It's a business page, so hopefully more people will see it from all around when they want to come visit Blissfield. So.
And it's more available. Our other one was private one, and so we couldn't post public things so much, and that's okay, but I think we want to get out there a little bigger than what the private one did.
And I've linked the Facebook group to the page, so the Facebook group can still be active.
Right.
That can be our own little thing, and then we can have the Facebook page for more public events and stuff.
Okay, so everybody go look at the new Facebook page and let us know what you think. And then these posts, please let us, I love that they're doing the photos and stuff that you do on growing up in Blissfield, and it kind of carries over to the Historical Society. And I think it's really great. Appreciate it, everybody, your efforts in that. Been working on applying for grants, found out that I didn't keep our state Day. So I have to pay a few $20 and get that up to date. And I just got the paperwork yesterday, but we are okay with the federal. I kept that up and I didn't realize there were two of them when I got handed the paperwork in 2002. So we'll work on grants and get some money. Coffee mugs, this is the coffee mug I think we're gonna sell here at the depot. And if you wanna come up, look at it later, we won't pass it around so much, but we went to order them before Christmas and they were out of stock. And so we'll get them ordered in and have them here at the depot and maybe have them at a couple of the shops downtown. Oh, thank you. See, she's gonna put it on. All right, and then the bicentennial committee, Bob Behringer actually agreed to be chairman. So that's cool, and he's going to do a Zoom meeting soon. And the interested people and ideas are as follows. John Abbott, Keystone Cops, Bob and Mary Abbott and Jeannie Ford are three of the original Keystone Cops from 1974. So there would do that again. Of course, Gary Connolly, Mike, Molly. Anybody else here? Okay. Who do we? I have Molly. I think I have Kathy later. We have Kathy, Barb, and Joy, right?
Yeah.
Eric Rumley, and I have you later too. You guys, I think you're on here later. Eric Rumley suggested the wax museum. That was you, right? Okay, and I think that's a great idea, right? So I don't know, do you guys want to be on the committee? I mean, we'll send an email, you can or can't, it doesn't matter. We're planning this is 2 years out, 1924, or 2024. And COVID brain, right? No. So, you know, you have to start planning this stuff now. And then we have artists had a bunch, but steam train rides, horse-drawn omnibus, recreate the 1974 businesses downtown, set up displays, hire balloons, lift off from downtown, recreate the cattle drive downtown, Blissfield image book from 2014, find spots and they have history markers, big raffle, a car or at least a toaster oven. A big raffle, a car or a toaster oven. Legion Chicken Barbecue, of course, week long, ending at River Raisin Festival. And I think that may not work. We just have to find out when the fair is going to be. And so, and I think the original one, when did they bury the time capsule? Isn't it like July 27th or something like that?
July 28th is when down at the village office, they have an envelope of everything in there that's supposed to be top secret, not open. But it says on there it's to be opened on July 28th of 2024.
And the festival is usually earlier than that, right? So we have to, the committee needs to figure out the timing on that. I don't think that we can start and finish for the River Raisin Festival. Maybe it'll kick off at the River Raisin Festival and end on the 28th. I don't know. And I don't know where the fair is. So that's the big stuff they have to figure out right away. Okay. And then, let's see what else. Classic car. Oh, this was Mars. Matching the 1974 time capsule, doing a new one, of course, and doing a similar new time capsule. Classic car run, tractor and horse pulls at the Tractor Museum location. Eric Martis, his brother, is that his brother?
Yeah.
Okay, he suggested sack races, watermelon eating contest, pie contest. Emma Schwartz said she's interested. Doug Pittman, Deborah Becker Wilson, another time capsule, so that's a good hit. Ray Pratt, Lee Ellen Reschler, Kevin's number 9. She liked the series of races. He had a bunch of races on it. Ryan Wagner, Parade, Gail Sinclair Gardner, is that right? W-A-R-G-E-R. Kissing Booth, if no COVID. And then a quarter-mile race and a marriage booth. I don't remember a marriage booth. I'll let get everybody's email addresses, and those of you that are members already, I have those. I'll get those all to Bob, and he will let us know when he wants to have the initial Zoom meeting. So, is that okay, everybody? All right, and I think that's it. Anybody have anything else you want to talk about?
We did have some visitors on last Saturday,
Visitors?
not a lot, but Annalee and I had a couple, and we actually had 2 people that live right here in town, and they said they never, well, they actually parked out front. One gal really literally parked right out front in front of the depot. And, you know, we didn't say anything, but then she said, after she came back, she said, I probably shouldn't park here. And I said, well, we, you know, and I said, well, it's, you know, it's okay, but yeah, it's kind of.
We keep it open for the DPW guys, and
Yeah, but I mean, she parked her car and just left.
They tried to block the back, they posted it out front and they walked away.
So they went down. Beautiful.
Yeah.
oh, she parked and left.
Yes, yeah, but then when she came back, but it was kind of funny because they came back and we said, you know, and it's local people, we knew who they were. And then whenever we left and it was time to go home, they were actually, I invited them in. I said, well, come on and look around. They both said, well, you know, we know it's been here, but we've never looked around. I said, well, you know, come on in. I said, it's pretty interesting. And so they did. They came in and talked for a couple minutes. And then when we left at 5, they were still sitting out here on the bench on the porch talking. So nice. But we did have a couple that from Plymouth signed the guest book and Plymouth, yeah, he said they come down every year and he stopped over. So.
Nice.
And there
Well,
was tons of people downtown. It was Ron stopped in, Art stopped in, but there was really a lot of people downtown just shopping and walking around. It was
Tons of people, yeah.
well, before you guys all leave, go look at Merle's marvelous carvings upstairs. And then also I have one more thing I almost forgot. Scott Jarrett from the Ohio Rail Experience from Cincinnati left his name 13th. And I called them, they are bringing people on the 29th, May 29th and May 30th with about 250 people. And they're gonna drop them off down in the small depot and have them walk to town. And I connected Heather with him, and they're working with A&B Railroad to be able to do this excursion train. And the train actually is leaving from Lovesick, Ohio. Did you guys know where that is? I have no clue. He had to spell it for me. So that's kind of exciting. I mean, they're gonna shop and eat and hang downtown for some hours. And we offered, I said, well, I know that we have dropped off here, but they said, well, A&B said they prefer to have them dropped off. And I guess it's not that far. And if we end up having to help do shuttles somehow, you know, I'm sure that could be worked out for people that maybe couldn't walk that far. I don't know, but they seem to think everybody could walk that couple of blocks to get to our downtown. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So that's it on my meeting. And thank you, Gary. Yes.
Also that's what I was wondering, I couldn't remember that date because I was here and Kathy was still here when he stopped in that day. And very young, very energetic young man. I think it's gonna be a very good event and very good for the town. But on the 22nd of May, I was downtown today at one of the antique shops, and they have a flyer there on May 22nd. There is a flea market in downtown here, so called the Black Squirrel Flea Market. So I mean, I don't know who's in charge of that, you know, but I thought that was a good name for it. And they said that'll be the 22nd of May. So there should be more people in town that day. So it'll be 2 weekends in a row, it might be with something going on. Maybe that one will have to switch it. We'll have to switch our weekends. So really community can put them both like that.
Towards the end.
Yeah, we'll have them on the end of the month or something.
Sure. Well, I'm sure we won't mind having people here to be hosts and direct people and public restrooms and all that stuff. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Yes,
I was talking to Barb about the flea market,
mm-hmm.
and she also said that the seniors are planning their senior car parade that same day.
Oh, okay. Got it.
But
So
they're only gonna come up to Jefferson Street and then they're gonna turn on Jefferson Street and then go down instead of going all the way to 223.
they'll turn and go in front of Josh's house and
Yeah.
out Pearl Street probably, or the other
No,
way.
No, it's Giles.
Oh,
Go towards
go
Giles.
towards Giles,
Yeah.
yep, okay, got it.
Like they
Okay.
did up here.
Okay. Sounds, well, that'll be a fun day. So that's a senior car show,
Because
right?
last year was on a weekday, this year they want to do it on weekends. So
Yeah.
more people. parents could
Appreciate
be
their
there.
cars, right? Okay, so we're moving along, right, guys? Plugging in, it's exciting. I told Emily today, I've been waiting since 1991 to have a real museum here. And we have a long way to go, but it's exciting that we're actually cataloging items and getting organized, and we'll be able to find things for people when they're looking, and it's just exciting. So with that done, I think now it's Gary's turn to talk. How quick, does anybody have any more questions, right? Okay. No, okay, Gary, you're on, buddy.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna pull this down, make sure that Annalee, I told Annalee earlier, I've been the face looking out on many times, but not the one presenting at any of these. So she's gonna have to make sure they can hear me here. So that is a new thing, so people please, be aware of that. One other thing I thought that, I don't know if people remember back for the 175th, I dug this shirt out of my closet, and haven't worn it in years and years. But these are something else that I think that we need to look at for the 200th anniversary, some things like this. I remember I had a banner also.
Hold on.
I have a banner I put up in my history class. It's just like this. And they hung them from the poles here in town. And they gave us those because we did the cemetery tour and the Civil War group. I was going to bring it in there and see if you wanted to hang it up in here. It's green, just like this. But I used to leave it up there every year in my class. And I would talk about it whenever we got near Blissfield, when it started in history. And the first week of school, I would talk about some history of Blissfield. And on my final exam, I always put an extra credit question. And it was, what was the date that Herbie Bliss started Blissfield? And I took the banner down before the test. You would not believe how many kids, their heads would go where the banner was, and it was gone. The dirty look for doing that to them, and I thought, that was there all year, you should know that date. Oh. Okay, Annalee,
1 minute.
let me know.
It was not.
I'm gonna feel how you are when you're doing a TV show or something, I guess.
Now I have to, where's the flagship?
I think so. We're trying to get it on Facebook, but we didn't get him in as the administrator clean enough to, right? Tell me when you're ready.
Did everyone see that? Yes.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, we'll have the lows.
Yes, I can see it.
okay. Can you all hear Gary?
What?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, you may, I don't know, let's see here.
I'll
Where am I
move for
way
you.
off?
I'll move for you.
How that's gonna work.
Oh, I got it.
This could be
Okay, well, this is getting going here. Oh, wow, I gotta go up just a little bit there. Does it look nice and clear to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brightening up some now. Okay, one of the topics when I was at the Senior Citizen Center and taught this, the sugar beet factory came up about as many times as the interurban POW camp. And it all ties in. You're gonna find out today that this factory, how important it was and how it tied into this town's history. And I don't know who you talk to, but there's so many people. I put a picture up this week on the Blissfield site, and how many people said their uncle worked there, their grandfather. I can say my grandfather worked there until he got hired at Willie's Oberlin in Toledo there. And then he worked there for the rest of his life. But he told me about working there when he was farming. In the off season, he worked at the sugar beet factory. Got to do a little history on sugar to tie it in. The earliest sugar was important in our earliest settlements. Sugar cane was what was important in the South. And that was part, remember, everybody remembers learning triangular trade when we were in school. Well, sugar was an important part of that, of course, which also involves one of the big cane plantations in the South. That's in Louisiana. But it did involve a lot of slaves, and that made it controversial. So you also had the political end of the sugar. Now this one's a little hard to see, but sugar beets growing, the first attempt for growing sugar beets were by abolitionists in New England. And they hoped to do that to hurt slavery. They thought if they could bring sugar beets in, we could rely on sugar beets for our sugar and not sugar cane. And then there wouldn't be the need for slavery in the South like this crop, the cash crop was demanding. In Europe, it was very big. And that's why later you're going to see a lot of immigrants were brought over from Europe to work here at the factory because they knew how to do it in the fields. The first areas in the United States, it started, the Mormons tried it, and California was the first success. I don't know if you can see here the green. My map here is too light, I'm sorry. But Michigan's over here. Can I walk through here, Emily? Right here, Michigan, this is our area. I need to get a better map. But it was one of the in the 1890s that became important for sugar beets. And this gentleman here, and I'd like to know if there's any tie between him and Deerfield, because the Kenseys, that was first Kensey's Corners in Deerfield, but this Dr. Robert Kensey is given the credit for developing a sugar beet, which became very, for Michigan, between factories around the state that sprung up for sugar beets are very similar to the one we had in Blissfield.
Where are those two factories located?
Owasso and Sebring, yeah. Owasso was, I think, one of the biggest ones in the state. I don't know if there's still some there. Most of it's down in Finley now, I think, that the sugar beets is at.
Carroll, Michigan, Bay City, and three active factories in the thumb area.
The thumb area is still our big area in the state? Okay. Blissfield, we had some of the industries that, of course, around the wood and the cattle early in this town. You can see a picture there. I don't know if there's a sawmill and grist mill along the river. We had the barrel factory, a stay factory that set out on the east end of town, near where the railroad goes. You go a little bit down toward the street there, and that's where that's set. And then the cattle, this was a big cattle shipping industry in this town. This, of course, a cattle drive right through Blissfield. In the early 1900s yet, they were doing that. And this one, that's the building that was next to your house, that the Gypsums started their decorative woodworking there, and the old cigar factory. So wood was very important in our early history, and as they tore and cut down the trees. Of course, we had the canning company, and that's Herbert Hathaway there. We get the Hathaway family, and that was a canning factory that Herbert had there. Then later it moved out on the east end of town. We also had the grain elevators that were important for the farmers as they grew grains. Also early in 1900, when the sugar beet factory came in, is the same time in that time period when the Turtle Bridges were finished, the interurban. And we now have two schools, on the east side and the west side, high school here in Blissfield.
Where were those those located? I know the one was at the Blissfield State Bank.
That's the top building, and then there was later added another part onto that building down where the gymnasium sat, where the elementary, the kindergarten building. And I believe there's a church there now. Uh-oh, families.
Yeah, Franklin Street, where Curtis
Okay, right.
around.
That was known as the Ward School, and that burned in the 40s, late 40s. It was gutted by fire, and then they later replaced it with the building that still sits at that site today. But that building goes back to the 1880s on the bottom. The one on the top was built in the early 1900s. Now, how we got into the sugar beets? In 1900, an acre of corn would bring in $18 for an acre. Grains, $7 to $12 an acre. Detroit Sugar Company said they'd pay $50 an acre for sugar beets. That's for a farmer, Mr. You could tell us how important that would be, that much the farmers here, how much you get per acre. And there was Mr. Geez, forget his name. I gotta go on here. In 1900, they had a meeting here at what was known as the Carpenter Hall. You can see it right here and up here at our right. And it says there 150 farmers came there, and 80 of them signed up to grow sugar beets in 1903, by 1903. And a lot of signs, you can see that how important that they were advertising the sugar beets and how much money that those were worth. Now, this is a coincidence. Anybody notice the coincidence here?
Today's date.
That's today's date. This was the headline in the Blissfield Advance in 1905. And it said, "Sugar factory will come." So that's the exact date, today's date, back in that year, that Blissfield found out, yes, we're definitely getting the sugar beet factory. The original factory would cost about $600,000. You're halfway there. 20, over $20 million that is worth in today's money, what it costs to build that factory.
They raised that in a couple of years to put it up, huh?
Yeah, well, they had that factory up in a year.
Wow.
By 1906, they were already refining sugar there. So it went fast. In the paper, every week they would have this, you could follow as an advance, the sugar factory notes. That was just an example of some of them on, I'm not going to read any, but it shows you that people in town could find out. This is the earliest postcard view in 1905 of the sugar beet factory. And it was run then by the Continental Sugar Company. It seems a little blurry to me. It's just like that. I don't know, the postcard is not that clear, and they all seem to be that way that I've seen over the years. You could take a tour by December of 1905. It was done. You could take tours of it. And people from Blissfield went there, and from also, I was told by someone that I believe it was Maxstone. I don't think anyone's here tonight.
Reed Mastone? Reed Mastone's dead.
I think his grandfather worked in the lab, their father.
Yeah.
And he said he took Henry Ford on a tour of the factory. He came here to see it.
Gary, Julie is watching via Zoom,
Oh, okay.
right? Is she there?
Are they hearing everything good? Good. This is a man I'd like to go and find all of his drawing. He goes by the name of Stark, and these were in the early advances before 1910. And he must be people were like at the out at the ethanol plant complaining about the smell of the smoke from the sugar beet factory. And his little saying, we should have more chimneys like this, year round. And his drawings always are about issues in Blissfield. And I don't know who he is, what his first name is or anything, but he went by Stark. And a lot of them, he has a little mouse that's always in the corner and says something very sarcastic during the cartoon. It's kind of funny, his little mouse character.
What's his mouse saying in this one?
He's not in this one. This is, like the one I put up on the Blissfield site showed Mr. Rentz, when his phone company was growing, he had a drawing of Mr. Rentz putting names into his phone book with a spoon. The little mouse in the corner says, I think you should be using a scoop show. You know, just little things like that he would throw in there for a little humor in his drawings. These are some early pictures of the sugar bee factory, the original buildings. I think even the back there, they added somewhat later, but these are postcards. Definitely the triple bridges are the most postcards of Blissfield, Lane Street, and then the sugar bee factory and the schools. Those are the main ones, but the sugar bee factory must have been very popular on postcards. There's a lot of different images. Now, this is from the Sanford Fire Insurance drawings. And this shows a diagram in 1918 of the sugar factory. And I'll tell you right now, I will admit, I do not know the process. I could not tell you exactly the process that took place inside that building. And if you look at there's all kinds of information of what areas of that were. Now, I can tell here, this shows this is where the pulp was dried. That's the building that's still there today. And then next to it, this was a storage building and like a rest area for people to take their breaks on in this building. And then over here was the office. But the rest of that is, you know, there's a lot of things. I know they made molasses there and other things. And I have a feeling if I were to try to explain the process of making sugar beets into sugar, it probably would be a lot longer talk and maybe more boring than that part that I feel.
Can you show us where the ball field is now and where the pool would be?
The ball field, excuse me, the driveway for the ball field goes right here between these two buildings today, and the ball field would have to be right here in this area. The pool would be from the office, I think, over and down in this area. That when they first put that in, I think they were finding some of the beet bends that they would dump the beets in that they ran into when they were building the pool. And some where the tracks came back there too. You can see some of the tracks in this, and another picture later.
So we're looking at it from.
We're looking at it from the south. That was our view of that.
Blissfield manufacturing across the street.
Yeah, there was later years, not back on that in 1918.
Right, okay.
Later, yes. This is I always like this picture. It's one of my favorites of the sugar beet factory. You have the wagon over there. This is something I recently found that the family that owned this, it was a Miller family, and they had a barn. And I think it's the barn that's still there on Cemetery Road. But they kept the horses there that were used on the grounds of the sugar beet factory to move things around. And this picture of this old telegram or article someone sent in for the old photo gallery, and it showed the teams of horses. Now, I was hoping that maybe someone was here tonight that would know if that is definitely the barn that's in this picture. When I put it up on the website for Blissfield, some people didn't think it was the same barn. So I'd like to get a definite answer on that. One of the important things. Oh, did somebody just answer?
Can you go back on that photo?
Can you go back to that photo?
Yep.
Is that the one on Gibson Street?
Yes, right where it turns into cemetery and goes out of
Yeah.
town.
I lived there when there was a camp back in the day.
Yeah, the migrant camp was back behind it, kind of to the left of it.
Yes, yes.
Now, do you know if that was the actual barn it's in the other picture?
The
It's
other-
close to the sugar beet factory, that seems to me possible.
Okay, there was an additional barn right next to that one. And as I remember when I was young, I walked into that barn and it had floors where people would live in. It was very unusual. And it had like 3-story on each side, and it had rooms where people would live in. Anybody who would answer those questions would be the Wagle family. Of course, they own that property. But yes, I remember a little bit of that.
That's a good suggestion. The Wagles, I know, owned that for years. Okay, the immigrant workers, maybe some of these immigrant workers lived in that barn at one time then, and from what you're telling us. But the first group to come, it was in 1904, German-speaking Russians that arrived. 1905, 800 Russian and Belgians. And I know that the Godden family came at that time, that's still around town. In World War I, many Hispanics came. Chapa, Martinez. I think Emily Martinez once told me that that's when her family arrived in this area to work in the sugar beets. A lot of people here know the Hungarian families that came, the Horkeys, the Dvorky.
Actually, the Horky family is from Czechoslovakia.
Okay.
And the Dvorsky is also from Czechoslovakia. Those are my grandparents.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes.
And they refer to this as Hunky Town. My grandfather always called it that. His dying day, that's still Hunky
You
Town.
also mentioned Poitic is one of the names.
Yeah, I have a whole list coming up here eventually of what's the Czechoslovakian names. Now, this is a picture of that whole area that the housing was at one time. You can see here Cemetery Road right here going out and curving, and the cemetery would be there. You can see there were roads that went back there where the people lived. And this was an article just before they tore most of those buildings down that had gotten in very bad shape that were the workers at the sugar beet factory. The Moravians are from Czechoslovakia, which I do see I have the Halubeck on this list also. Again, but they're from Czechoslovakia and came, and a lot of the names that are still here, and I have a bigger list coming up. It's Studnickas and the Brablick, this Karl Brablick was lived near Britain, and he wrote a book called Tales from the Headlands, which is all about the Moravian people from Czechoslovakia that came here. The Halubeck family, this picture here shows the father and mother and their son. I believe his first name was, if I was looking right, William Joseph. And he was a private and was killed in World War II in Italy. But they were from the Deerfield area.
So is Jerry telling us then that Horky and what was the other name?
Dvorsky.
Dvorsky would both be also not German, but or whatever we had.
They're from Czechoslovakia. They're both represented in the book that he just talked about. I have that book.
Czechoslovakia.
The tail, yes.
You have the tales of the.
Yes.
It's a hard book to find nowadays. It's missing from a lot of libraries that think they have it. When you go to leave and look for it, they don't have the booklets.
Yes, I have it because there's a picture of my grandmother in it, and there's other things. They were from Czechoslovakia.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, this picture here shows the section of Czechoslovakia where many of them came from. I won't attempt to pronounce the names there. And the next map to it, which I believe is also from the book, these are from the Tales from the Headlands, show the areas that they settled in Lenawee and Monroe County to work in the sugar beets. These are some pictures from that book. And the Tales from the Headlands, from the pictures I saw, this kind of fits the title. When they took a break up in the top corner, they would tell stories from Czechoslovakia. And when they arrived here, the first people arrived here, and that's where we get the Tales from the Headlands. They called that the head. When they did that, took their breaks and talked. Some of these pictures are of the Onderbeck family that's settled out by Mulberry near me. These are some more of the Onderbeck, and I think not the Studnickas yet. They're on the next one. But the one here shows a funeral of one of the women in Ogden Township. And they had the casket on the wagon with the horse. And they were, I don't know, probably the Ogden Cemetery, I'm imagining, is where she was buried. Yes, this is the one, the top corner, the Studnica family, which is big and that name is still around this area. And then you have some more of the Anderviks, and you have some group photos from some of their clubs of the Moravian clubs that they had. A lot of their things with the, okay, here's my big list. This is the one that has all the members of the Bohemian, the American Bohemian Club. And you can see, I know some names that jump out at me are Foytek. I graduated with Rich Foytek. In the book Tales from the Headlands, he's mentioned in there as recently graduating from Blissfield High School as a descendant. Studnicas, there's, I even saw Novak, and I went to talk to Mike today. I never mentioned it to him, and he got the COVID, and he's out middle school there. They've been having a problem there with students and staff with the COVID right now. So I couldn't check with him on the Novak name to see if it was related. You can also see the Novaks there, then the Anderviks.
Can you just read it quick?
All the names? You're gonna make me try to pronounce it all I'm sticking with the ones I know here, Connie. Oh, geez. I know Becker and Benedict, Bravlik, is that the way you say that? Okay. Now, I don't know. See, I'm gonna butcher them. That's what I'm afraid of. You know, Foytex and Ivan, that was a big name. I don't know if that's still around this
There's a
area.
lot of Britain names in here, yeah.
Is it?
Morgans, Ivans, those are all Britain areas.
Well, that would fit with the guy who wrote the book because that was where he was from.
Can you read it, Joy?
Well, double check, I don't know, Studnica, looks like Smolka, Rakishka, yeah, Mueller's. A lot of Mueller's. Fuzzy for me too, there's a lot of Corrigans.
Rice, that seemed to me a strange name, Rice. That didn't sound like the rest of them. I don't
There's a
know if that.
Roy and Anna Kneisel, don't know if that's any connection to Kneisels from around here in Ogden and St. Frick or not.
Here's this Joseph and Georgia Novak right there. I don't, Mueller. I can read that. So this, I'll tell you, I need to hear them before I can pronounce them good.
I know that Frank and Francis Kazumplik are up there. Frank was originally from Britain, and then Francis was my aunt. She was from Blissfield.
Came out of Sylvania area and went all the way over toward Swanton area and this area of Ohio, but it cut off at Allen Junction and came up into Lenawee County. Here at Southlands, there was a bead dump on Yankee Road, Court, Holtz. Most of these stops are also bead dumps there. And it looked like at one time they proposed putting another track in Blissfield, but was never done, to go on the south side of town. This is from Bob Sell's book on the Toledo and Western. That's where I got this map. And this picture also, this shows how these cars that were part of the sugar beet factory pulled off. These are all filled with sugar beets. Now according to the book, he thought this was down in Ohio between Berkey and Matamora that this picture was taken of this. And then this is the one that worked around the yards later at the sugar beet factory. That's a picture we have upstairs in one of our photo albums. Now these pictures, you can see a picture of Korth, the Smith store at Korth in Raga Township. There's a beet dump in Berkey. There's also a bead dump next to the store, which I know one of the names is Allbrain, that owned the store in Southlands. You can see the Tripp School there. Now this building here is owned by the Ford family, and it used to sit down by the store, and that's where they were able to weigh the beets. It was something, much about that or remember? No? But this, they moved it down to where their barn is. They used to set down there closer, but this was part of the interurban system at one time. And that's not in the county, but I found that picture online showing them dumping a wagon in a beet dump.
Gary, are you saying that they use the interurban tracks to haul the beets?
Yep.
Okay, because I always thought that was just a passenger train.
It was, at first it started that, but it became the interurban. Once that came in, the streetcar, I guess, is what it's most similar to. But that became very important in the beet industry, the sugar beet industry.
Were the trains a little bit different that hauled the beets then?
I have heard that there was a dump in Ottawa Lake, and that was by the train that's there.
That's when the beach went to Findlay, Ohio.
When
And after the factory here was closed, Great Lakes Sugar bought 3 of them, closed Blissfield in the 50s, and sent in a dump down at Ottawa Lake so that us people could deliver there, and then they went down there by train.
Okay.
They unloaded them down there with a clam bucket.
I thought Wayne Walters had told me there was a dump there one time, and so that was later than that.
Yeah, that was altogether different.
All right. Okay, these show this is all the tracks that went back to the sugar beet factory. They called it Collins Yard. And there were train tracks that came off of the New York Central, and then you had tracks that came off the interurban line that came through. And those all went back, and they could keep the side tracks, and then they moved them, I think by that smaller engine, they moved them into the dumps and closer to the factory. And this is a picture of some of how the dumps were set up out there. There are some where there's just an amazing amount of sugar beets in them. 1929, the Great Depression started, and the factory was going to close down. And the 3 banks in Blissfield at that time came together, and I think it came up with like $150,000. And important people behind that, Ken Glazier, Otto Wagner, and Andrew Hookey, were important in getting that going to keep the factory open during the Great Depression. And then the Great Lakes Sugar Company, that's when they took over. But at that time, this was Gibson Carter Bank. And then you had the Blissfield State Bank, and the First National Bank is in the building that most of us accept as now the Gibson Carter. But that bank is the only bank in Blissfield that went down during the Great Depression. They closed their doors. And I think some people went to jail from that bank because of it. So, but they were at the time able to help out. And then the Gibson Carter Bank moved into that building later. Always wish they never would have kept that building somewhere. That was a neat building.
Is that where the village office is now?
Yeah, the village office sits on that site today. And I miss the bulldog. That was my favorite thing. You know, the set in the corner, the old bulldog.
I can tell you
This
where
is
the
Gibson.
bulldog is.
I know where it is too. Who has it?
Yeah.
But Mrs. Gibson bought that because the bulldog was a symbol of something so strong and firm and stable that she gave that to her husband, and they had that in the bank for years and years. I can remember as a little kid standing there, nothing else to do there but look at the bulldog when I was there with my grandparents.
Shouldn't we get that back just out of principle?
Well, you know what happened? When it became, I think, Key Bank, somebody took it to their house, I heard the story. And then the person who used to work here at the bank in Blissfield found out. She told him it belonged in the bank, not at his home. And she got it back in her office up in Adrian. That's where it is.
It's right through that. Yeah, right on her shelf, yeah.
Who has it?
Beth, Van, how you say her last name? Van Arsdale? Yeah, Van Arsdale, she's got it.
Yeah.
Can I get her email?
I was quite proud of the fact that she's got it.
Can you just point me in the direction?
Adrian Key Bank.
On Main Street, yep.
Don't tell her who told you it was in there. I think I was told to be quiet. Now this picture, this postcard, this is the office. And citizens said they wish they would have left that there. They said that was the neatest building architecture on the outside and inside of the office. At one time, their office was downtown, right where I think Terry's Snack Bar used to be. They had a place there and they sold sugar out of Blissfield. Now, these are the only pictures I've ever seen inside the factory. The top one there, the person who loaned that to me to photograph it, said that's where they were mixing sugar and molasses to make brown sugar. The other ones, I don't know for sure what they are. One of them was in Bob's book, the bottom right there. Now, we have this picture up here, and I believe this is in the lab there. And the man in that picture is Nate Huntington, one of the interesting people from Blissfield, probably most of you never heard of. When his mother was a miller, her father was A.O. Miller, who had a theatrical company that went all over the United States. His mother claims to have worked with Buffalo Bill and Edwin Booth when she was yarded in the, and her father, A.O. Miller, had this great theatrical company. Well, he traveled with that when he was a little kid, all over the country. And then he would come back and he went to school here and graduated from the West Side School, went out and acted some more, came back to this area, learned the cobbler business and started a shoe shop that sat where the village office is, where that bank was later built, the First National Bank. While he was there, he couldn't get the theater out of the system. And he still traveled whenever he could with the Gittavans, a local theatrical group that used to travel around northern Ohio and southern Michigan. And he's a very interesting guy with all his stories. He also, there's a great picture upstairs, and I think it's the West Side, the Ward School football team, and he's in it. And they had a dog as a mascot and a cat. And he's holding the cat in that picture. And the names are on the picture, but they're very hard to read. I'm not sure if I understand them right. But he and his mother, they're both buried in the cemetery. And I have them in my little booklet I'm working out on the cemetery tour I want to do there. Now, that factory was so important to Blissfield, I don't know if we had a name for that factory, the sugar beet factory. But in 1927 was the first time I've seen an article that called them the Sugar Boys. And the man down in the right-hand corner is Nick Kerboy. And Nick gets the credit. He wrote articles for the Telegram, and they believe he coined the name Sugar Boys for the Blissfield football teams and sports teams. Nick Kerboy is one of our famous people from town. He went on to, he was a school teacher at one of the country schools a while. He went to Michigan State, worked for their sports department, was hired by the Detroit Lions. And his first job with the Lions was to make sure Bobby Lane was sober enough and on time to play the game on Sundays back in the 50s. From there, he worked up to general manager of the Detroit Lions. A great trivia question to ask somebody. Who was the Detroit Lions' last general manager when they won 3 championships? Those words don't even seem to go together. Lions championships. But he was their general manager in the 50s when they won 3 championships. And he was so important in Detroit, when the Pistons moved from Fort Wayne to Detroit, they wanted him so bad, they paid him $1 million contract to leave the Lions and come over to the Pistons. But he wasn't successful in basketball. He went on later to start the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame that he's part of. And he lived up around Detroit, but it must be he wanted to come back to his old hometown because he's buried here in the cemetery by the Kerboys in Blissfield. Very interesting guy. But another thing by this picture, you can see, you can't see it real clear here. I got to do a little better picture, but the girls are wearing Sugar Girl shirts on the tennis team. So there were also Sugar Girls that used that name during the time.
Gary?
Yes.
What nationality were the Kerboys? The fella asked me. I thought Armenian, maybe.
I forget. What'd you?
Lebanese.
It could be Lebanese.
That's what I think. Phil told me.
No.
Lebanese?
Lebanese, yes. I think they were the same as what was, Danny Thomas.
Oh, he was Lebanese.
I think they were the same.
We were always told in church, Presbyterian churches where that it was Lebanese.
Okay.
These, during the war, sugar was very important. It was rationed. Those are some examples and one of the posters encouraging people to plant more sugar. These are some of the tools that were used at that time, the sugar beets. I would, if anyone has any of the styles of pitchforks or the beet knife, donate to the museum. It'd be great to have a display on the sugar beet factory here. There's this one row, was that a planter or a harvester? I think harvester. They go into one row at a time. And this is out on Keith Smith's farm, old farm, and that's one of those harvesters, one row harvester that's sitting there rusting away, but Keith told me it was there and I went out and took a picture of it.
Is that what a beet knife looks like? I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever seen one.
It looked like a medieval weapon to me. That's what I think of when I see it. Because that's what it's used as.
It'll put your eye out, right?
Use it, Bill?
I'm sure many people got it in their shins if they weren't careful with it. And then, of course, during World War II, with all the men off to war, we needed the German prisoners of war that they offered. The first year, 500 prisoners came to Blissfield. And the sugar beet factory had asked for 300, the canning company 60, and the alfalfa mill 30. And then they had 110 just for farmers to use it for their own usage at their farms. And that became very important for the 2 years in 44 and 45 that we had prisoner of war camps here in Blissfield. And then we just had the memory the day of when the accident occurred, the terrible accident. The truckload of prisoners of war there is not from this area. It's from Owasso, Michigan, but I have a feeling that's pretty close to what they were being transported in when the accident occurred. It was a driver from the sugar beet factory, and that's an article there from the Telegram showing it afterwards. There was, that tells you there, guard and 16 prisoners were killed. These are showing the back of the sugar beet factory and how high the piles of beets got. That's amazing to me how big they are. There's some more coming here. And this was a very dangerous place to work. I don't know if who was it, Pappenhagen, Vicky, that told me her uncle was electrocuted here. His name was Boyle, Jack Boyle. He worked there and was electrocuted. I know that those sugar beet piles could fall and smother people and crush them. My grandfather, when he worked there, told a terrible story of where when they brought in the sugar beets, they would throw them, put them into a vat of boiling water to get the skins off. And he said one day a man, he said the edge was only about, a little bit above the knee, and he backed up and went in one of those. And by the time they got him out, it just, I'm not trying to gross people out, but it boiled all the flesh off his bones. And he died of shock on the floor next to it. So, it was a very safe place to work either. Here's some more, a night picture. This is from Bob's book that I borrowed from Bob. And I think the one down below, they're both from Bob's book. But it shows the cars unloading the beets out behind the factory there on the tracks. These are another one of showing pictures. This picture came from the family up north of town here, Prelips. That's them with a load of sugar beets heading into Blissfield. And here's some trucks of sugar beets, waiting beets. These are some pictures around the factory. Somebody took at one time that they gave me to go photograph, and I don't know a lot about them exactly. I have no clue if this was some way of weighing them. Was that possibly what it was for?
That conveyor out the rear is building the pile, and the dirt is separated from.
That one at the bottom right, yeah.
But
What was the thing there though? Do you know what that was used for? The crossbar there looks like? When I looked at that, I thought it was a way of weighing, or they didn't wash them or anything. I couldn't figure out what that would be. Oh, in 1950 to 1954, they were closing. There were articles in the Blissfield Advance that the Great Lakes Sugar was closing, the office here, and everything was in doubt. And they hired over 300 people to work in that factory, so it's very important to the town. This is the picture I put in the Blissfield, growing up in Blissfield site that we have upstairs in the museum collection. It shows the Blissfield manufacturing, and then this was taken in 57. The plant had closed down, but they hadn't started to tear it down yet. And you can see here that these are this building and that building is all that's left. And that building's gone now with the driveway to go back where the ballpark is.
Blissfield, I heard is the largest sugar beet factory east of Mississippi. Is that true?
Well, Mr. Bierman here gave me this, they 600 tons they were capable of handling at this factory.
per day.
Per day, that was in a day.
Yeah.
So they had quite a huge production. This is a book that he's loaning me to look through for some more information. I know you hear from people like Rudy Morales and Lawrence Berger that this was their playground when they were kids. They had a basketball court set up in one of the buildings.
That's what Mr. Berger told me when we had when I was over there for the day on on Halloween, when we did the commemoration. He and his brother would play over there.
This is something a lot of people talk about going to watch when they imploded the smokestacks. And there's a film out there that somebody has that I need to get a copy of someday, that they actually filmed the smokestack coming down at the factory.
Isn't it so sad that all the wonderful buildings, and I know time marches on, you don't need it anymore, but it's kind of sad, isn't it? I think of that as a high school too, it's too bad that it's gone. And even the old house that used to be where the post office is, as lovely as the post office is, that old house was amazing, but isn't it interesting? Life marches on, things are obsolete, you tear it down, right?
And the thing I think is important for this group to do is to make sure we don't lose any more history from the town, to try and help to fight that however we can and make people aware of how, I'm worried about Carpenter Hall there. I know if that gas station was coming in, that was supposed to be torn down. I don't know what the future is of that right now, but that's a very historic building, that brick building. Now this shows from the advance, them loading the cars with metal from and I always, when they first talk about the pool there, I always thought, I don't know how they're going to put the pool around there, because when they cleaned this up, I'm sure in cleaning up to them was you couldn't see anything above ground. I'm sure there was a lot left below ground when they were done cleaning this up. And so I always wondered what the first time they couldn't build it where they wanted to, and they moved it out further where it is today.
I was in high school. I graduated in 57 when they hauled that factory away. And of course, it was purchased by Great Western Sugar from Denver, Colorado. And the wrecking crew that done that work had the highest bid on it, but it was 20, 30 years later, I learned as I was on the Growers Association for over 30 years, they never got paid for it. I mean, the wrecking crew right there filed bankruptcy, so that all went in somebody else's pocket.
Really?
But the factory itself, I'm not sure it's true, but they went bankrupt 2 or 3 times from the time it was started. But it was great for the town, but
Well, I gotta make sure to write down everything you know about that.
it wasn't the best. Sugar industry up in Michigan now is on better footing, but it's all owned by the growers. The companies that built these all backed away from it in the last 20 years, and they've all formed cooperatives. I mean, we thought we'd be a cooperative down here, but we're too far from the smokestack. That was always the saying. You got a little close to the smokestack so you can save that freight money to move. And that's where the interurban, you see, the farmers had to pull them wagons around with the horses. Well, they couldn't go very far, so they went to the interurban that was stationed down by Reagan. And then the train brought them in. But my dad always told me, my dad would be 120 if he was alive, that the growers were expected to pit the beets. That Horky name come up. He always said, Horky is, they always spoke broken. And he would say, first you got to be pitted to half. Meaning you had to put half your crop in a pile at the end of the field. Then you could haul them to town. You see, in today's world, they build the big stacks where they're accessible so they haul them to the factory. And out in the Minnesota and Dakota areas, they have, I think, 5 huge $1 million buildings. They freeze them in there with using the natural airflow under them, cracks in the cement floor. I've only in them once, but they can operate the factories all winter. When this time of year, they would start taking the beets out of the buildings that are froze like cement with cranes. I've seen one of them that they can dig them loose and thaw them out, you know, and make good sugar out of them. For back in those days, they wanted to operate 100 to 120 days, but now they can operate to the 1st of May on stored beets in huge buildings and or piles. But it's an interesting.
What's the price on an acre? What's it now?
Well, my goal, one time in my 40+ years, I attained $1,000 gross money. The rest of the time, it was between 500 and 1,000 gross money per acre. See, it went from $50 an acre to 500 in round figures. But it was an interesting crop.
Very profitable, wasn't it, for this area, for all the farmers?
Most years, yeah. But it was hard on the land in a bad year.
That's what I heard from some, that it really was tough on the.
We started harvesting September one year, and we quit in January.
I just remember the name of the first guy who started this year, Mr. Knapp. Colonel Leader lives in his house now. He was the first one to start doing sugar beets in this area, in Ogden Township. Imagine that.
I saved it from the 70s.
Says 76.
This is what I got last week. I mean, this, I got friendly with the editors of these magazines that come monthly.
Nice.
And,
So you've done sugar beets a lot.
Since 1957.
Okay.
Now this one here shows the sugar beet boys died with the factory, the name. When the factory came down in 58 and 59, the student body at Blissfield voted to change their name. And at first they didn't know, and finally they came to Royals. And the only reason I've ever found is that the color, you look at the Sugar Boys coat down here at the stables and the cheerleading Royals there, they were purple and gold. And they thought that was a royal color. There's one other thing I've always wondered about. A coincidence, very big coincidence, if it didn't at all affect us. If you go to the grave of Herbie Bliss in the Blissfield Cemetery, he was born and raised in Royalston, Massachusetts. If you take the T-O-N off of it, you got Royals. I don't know if that had anything to do with the Royals, but that sure is a huge coincidence that that's the town he lived in. But you can see also that's the year that they moved the high school from the old building over to the new building. This is an area from the blade that shows where the new high school was built there. Some people say we should have stuck with it. Who is it? Mr. Lamley that still has a sugar boy coat he wears for sporting events. Now this shows the two buildings that are still there. I stopped in there one day and they let me roam around in there and take some pictures. You can see in that postcard view the same two buildings. They're not quite the same angle, but close. And what they did is they brought the beet pulp in here, and you can see the number 9 and 8. Those correspond with the days of the month. And they would put those, pile them in those areas, and they knew after a month they were dry enough, and they grind it up into feed. And that's what they did with the beef pulp. Before this building, I think they went and dumped it all about over there where Weigel's factory is and the migrant camp was, and out behind is where they dumped the pulp for years until they had this building to dry it in. This is the downstairs, and then there's the upstairs. Now that big thing there is part of the seed. It's not, it wasn't part of the sugar beet business. That's part of the proceeds business.
Gary, Bagels have the sugar beet factory? Was it Bagel or did they do the canning for the tomatoes? They just did tomatoes, so.
I think they just did tomatoes, Weigel.
George Weigel built the factory on the area where the sugar factory would discard it was limestone. I mean, lime was used in the sugar making process, and it would be, they just had to get rid of it. And I've been on Weigel's property, and it's white underneath it. It was high calcium lime. Now down in Ohio, there's an island out in Lake Erie where this high quality calcium lime, they would bring it in rocks and they'd grind it into a extremely powder refined. It had something to do with separating sugar from pulp. I could never explain it, but centrifuge and spinning of it, and they always told us you got three products. You got molasses, you got sugar, and you got pulp. Sugar is where you make your money, and the other two you gotta get rid of. I mean, molasses is great for food, but messy.
Right. Okay.
This building would make a great bomb shelter. It's very sturdy built. Now, this is today, a little bit about it. And this is the most recent map I could find, 1994. It did show we are the lightest color here. Runaway and Monroe was, but you can see the biggest part of the business nowadays is in the Thumb area, Michigan. I don't know, do you know how many, do you know of anyone that raises beets in Runaway?
You can't raise them. Because it's a cooperative, it's owned by the growers. I had shares, but I had to sell them when they no longer needed the beets down here. It's about fueling the factory. That's why Blissfield lost their factory. When Tecumseh Products started hiring people, they weren't going to work in the fields. You know, they want a job like this. They want to operate one of these things. So the industry just lost out because it requires so much labor in the field.
Yeah.
That's all mechanical now. They said a guy in a wheelchair runs one of them harvesting.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's changed from by hand, the pickers and one row harvester. And here's what we got today. These pictures show the modern harvesting of the sugar beets. You know, it's all mechanical now, done by machines. Okay, any questions or comments?
Can we say goodbye to our Zoom people?
Does there anyone has a question or?
No, just thank you for allowing me this because I'm not in Blissfield. I'm actually watching from my home in Las Vegas.
Oh, you might be a attendee then tonight, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. I really enjoy it. I mean, Blissfield's my home, you know, so I was born and raised. So I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
You bet. Well, thank you for joining us.
Coming, everyone.
Okay. All right. Good night.
Thank you, Bob, for all.
Thank you, Bob, for helping us.
Thanks, Bob.
Sure.
We
No
have Art
problem.
Weaver. Hi, Art.
Oh, Art's there.
Sorry.
All right, and the rest of you guys, thank you, thank you. Oh, Christine.
It was great.
Thank you, Christine.
Thanks so much for zooming. Frank's here too, watching.
Yep, it was your. Hey, Frank, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Who has a question?
No questions for me.
There's one in the comments.
What's it say? I can't read it.
Time of Findlay and Fremont and Ohio related to contact the Great Lakes.
Hi, Christine.
Bye.
Things when they were tearing it down to modernize it.
Hi, everyone.
Did you?
Art, is that Art?
Thank you.
Bye, Art. Christine's back.
Hey, Bob.
Carrie?
Hey, Bob, did you put it on YouTube?
Before he would.
Yeah.
Hired as a brush man. And he went.
That was a great picture.
I think he's been
I remember,
there.
you put all those on there.
He got married.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Are we done, Annalee?
Yeah, we're done.
Okay. Was Connie going to talk any about the bicentennial?
She did. She talked a little bit about it in the beginning.
Yeah. That's when I couldn't hear a thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Is this your letter?
Yeah.
Hold on. Do you want me to bring her over?
I'll talk to her tomorrow. It's okay.
Okay. I'm sorry the noise wasn't good in the beginning, for everyone in general.
I learned that from Rotary too, especially in a small room like that with that many people. It's going to be almost impossible.
Yeah. Okay.
People have to talk one at a time.
Right. Did you put this on the library YouTube?
Yeah, that's the only thing I've got access to. So it's on the library YouTube, but it's set up as private right now. No, it's public, but it's YouTube makes it difficult to find anything, that isn't really popular. So I can send you the link to it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming and sitting with us.